It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the Blues Rock Show. I'm Pete Francis, joined by Willie Witten. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to get all the latest videos. Willie, this week we're going to kick things off talking about your favorite streaming platform. Now, in today's music business, and I think especially with the pandemic, pretty much everything has moved towards streaming. And I think the pandemic has really kind of cemented it. We already knew that CDs and physical product were kind of dying and on the way out, but I really feel like now with the pandemic, I mean, they're pretty much dead at this point, RIP. So looking at the streaming platforms, what are your favorites right now?
My favorite, personally, my personal favorite, it's the one that I use. I pay a subscription for it. It's Tidal, Tidal, like a tidal wave. The reason why I like it is very simple. It does two things for me. One, it does have a very wide and vast and deep library. So I'm not really missing out on much music most of the time. And also it pays about somewhere around 3 times on average the per streaming rate royalty, which is pretty big to me because of what you said, Pete. Where CDs go by the wayside, albums have made a little bit of a blip back up, but they're still not the main source of revenue. So seeing some of that money get into the pockets of artists is important to me. I can also say iHeartRadio pays even slightly better per stream. However, it doesn't have the same depth of catalog. An odd one that has sort of lost subscribers in the past couple of years is SoundCloud. But the interesting thing about SoundCloud is they do allow for really easy uploads. So although maybe you're not making a lot of money as an artist on SoundCloud, it's a great way to share the music. It's a great way for us. Sometimes at Blues Rock Review, we get submissions that are through a SoundCloud link. It really does allow not so much for as a way to go ahead and make your bread, but it is a way to go ahead and get the word out there, and it's extremely convenient easy to open. So those are my thoughts, I guess. What do you think?
For me, I would have to say YouTube is my favorite as a consumer. And I think the reason why I like YouTube is, a lot of times the song is accompanied with a music video. So these days, a lot of the times when I'm consuming music, I'll just turn on my smart TV and put YouTube on and just go through a playlist, and I'll just play music videos. And I've got a sound bar connected to my TV. And so that's what I find myself doing a lot these days, is listening to music through YouTube. And it's very convenient because I think the way YouTube kind of manufactures a playlist for you, it kind of automatically does it with their algorithm. And it works pretty well. It's pretty much based upon your browsing history and what you listen to. And so I think it does a pretty good job of kind of shuffling and putting together a random playlist. So I definitely like YouTube as a consumer. As you mentioned, I think SoundCloud is great for sharing. You see SoundCloud a lot with submissions to our website. It's easy to embed a SoundCloud track. I like SoundCloud as well. I think Bandcamp is really good for that as far as embedding and sharing. I like Bandcamp, and I like the options that Bandcamp gives artists as far as if they do want to monetize their music. I think Bandcamp has some good options there as well.
Yeah, Bandcamp sort of has a little bit of a storefront feel to it at times. At least that's how I feel. There's some business that can be conducted beyond just the basic streaming. So yeah, I agree. That's pretty cool. You're right. YouTube, Pete, has that video and that ability. You know, they've used the term wormhole. It does whatever is in their special sauce of an algorithm. They seem to do a good job on the wormholeness of streaming, not to mention the videos.
If only that algorithm worked for this show, Willie, and people discovering the show.
You know what? Any day now, they'll be getting in touch with us, Pete. I spoke with them, and they are eager to be giving us their algorithm. So don't you worry. I took care of that.
Yeah, so if anyone has the secret to the YouTube algorithm, please feel free to share. Let us know about that.
Not likely. Here's someone we didn't talk about. And when you think of streaming in today's music environment, who's the first person you think of, Pete?
When I think of streaming?
Yeah.
Like first artist?
I was going to say first format, first company.
Oh, first company. First company that I think of when it comes to streaming. I guess today, I mean, it would be Spotify.
Okay, well, Spotify announced recently in the news that recently, as of this year, 13,400 people, artists, different entities, made $50,000 through streaming royalties alone on their platform. In the past, Pete, I've ripped into Spotify, or maybe not been too kind about them or their owner, but I have to hand it to them. That's 13,400 acts streaming alone gets them a living at 50K. What do you think about that? Is this insignificant, Pete, or do you think this is a huge step forward, or are they sort of overhyping this?
Well, I think it's interesting now that Spotify is being a bit more transparent and actually sharing that information with people. But when you think about it, at the end of the day, how many artists are putting their music on Spotify? 13,400 is not that many when you think about it at the end of the day. Okay, that's 13,400 that are making at least $50,000 within a year. Okay, $50,000 you're making a living, but it's not necessarily like you're crushing making a living.
Right.
So it's not, to me, I don't think it's that amazing when you look at that number, 13,400, because that's all the artists in the world. And out of all the musicians and all the artists in the entire world, 13,400 are making at least 50 grand in a year. To me, I don't feel like it's that great of a number. What do you think, Willie?
I think that's true. I think that it is an eye-popping number, but it's an eye-popping number because, like you said, this is the first time we really get to see some of these numbers. 13,000 sounds big, you know? If I had 13,000 cars, I'd be pretty stunned, right? But you're right. In the big picture, it's not so big. Like you said,
it's basically like a population of a town.
Exactly. And it, like 50K, don't get me wrong, but it's not killing it. When we want to jump up to that level, killing it, I would say we're talking 500K, 500,000. That's killing it in my book. That's only 1,820. So maybe when we think about how big Spotify is and how much money they take in, maybe that's the better number to look at. And then all of a sudden, you're right. All of a sudden, we're back to what we're saying is, you know what? Sometimes people feel that Spotify is a bit greedy still.
The other interesting question is how many of these artists are kind of taking that audience and leveraging it in other ways that they are making money, leveraging it towards, merchandise and getting people to their website and that sort of thing. How many of these artists are actually able to take, that Spotify audience and those listeners on Spotify and actually leverage that audience and make money in other ways? That's a question we don't necessarily know the answer to.
Right. It's the number that Spotify also, to their, or not to their detriment, they don't necessarily have those numbers. And it's not reasonable to expect that they find out those numbers or leverage them for the bands themselves. So I do think that, I don't know, we've said this before, streaming and physical sales are a smaller portion of artist revenues. That's been going that way for a while. That's why the pandemic was so devastating, because it was already an industry leaning on live performances, buying the album at the show, selling a t-shirt. That's where they're getting their money from these days. And when you take that away, that's harsh. The last thing I'd say, I found this number to be perhaps more important to Spotify than just a simple number of who's making 50K a year. 57,000 artists now account for 90% of monthly streams. And to try to put those numbers into perspective, that is a huge change from 6 years ago. It is 4 times as large. So what that means, making it, in layman's term, is that there's a more even distribution of who's getting listened to. It's not just the big names. They're getting more people exposure. So yeah, the people who are making the most money are still the ones that are making the most money. But to your point, that does show that there are more people getting exposure. Artists and listeners are better able to connect. And then that can be something huge for an artist or their brand, or when concert going gets back together. Pete, I think that's a far more important number than 13,000 making 50K a year.
Yeah, the playing field is starting to level out, as you're mentioning. And I think part of that too is just the access to equipment and home recording and all those things, especially during the pandemic. I think so many artists have really had to, whether they want to or not, and do those other aspects, have had to learn a lot of those other aspects too. And I think at the end of the day, I think that's going to be a benefit to them. But you're talking about the physical sales. I think today so much the physical sales is when fans go to the live show and buy the physical album. And I think a lot of that is just done because they just want to support the artists.
Right.
So right now with bands not on tour, you're not getting that. So I have to imagine the physical sales right now have got to be way down.
Yep. Right. So it is pertinent news. Speaking of pertinent in the news, Blues Rock Review just released a top 10 list. The top 10 list, Pete, was top 10 blues collaborations. Pete, what did you think about the list, besides it being a great list? Which songs did you connect with most? Because obviously we all have our preferences. What were a couple of your favorites from the list?
I think as far as the list goes, I like the B.B. King, Eric Clapton collaboration. I thought that was great. I think there's a couple tracks from the album that they did that I really enjoyed. Outside of the list, a more recent collaboration that I really enjoyed was Joe Bonamassa and Beth Hart.
That's on my list too of the ones I was going to talk about.
I think especially for me, the first album that they did, I thought, in my opinion, was the best. And that wasn't even the album that got nominated for a Grammy.
Right.
But I thought, in my opinion, I thought that was their best one. I thought their cover of I'd Rather Go Blind was awesome. I think Beth Hart's vocals on that track, and then Bonamassa's guitar solo, I thought was just like a perfect combination. I thought that was one of Joe's best solos he's ever done. And Beth Hart, just killer vocals, killer performance on that. So I really enjoyed that collaboration. As far as more recent collaborations, what about you, Willie?
Well, off the list, one of my favorites really was, and I think it took the number 4 slot, which I think is a fair place to put it. I might have put it a bit higher because I love the song and I love the pairing. I love Going Down with the number 4 spot, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jeff Beck, who is, I think, perhaps the most underrated of sort of the Clapton, Page, Beck trio that we like to think of. I might have put that higher, but I think it's a great spot at number 4 too. As far as recent things go, you beat me to Joe Bonamassa and Beth Hart, both on the album, which was pre-Seesaw, and the song choice. Something that's not as recent, but an album that I grew up listening to that I thought was tremendous was the collaboration of a Buddy Guy and Junior Wells Play the Blues. I know that's not as recent, but holy cow, I think that's one of the best. And there's not a bad track on it. You can go pick Messin' with the Kid, which is the big sort of marquee song by Junior Wells. But in my opinion, song like Honey Dripper to close the album, it's better than Messin' with the Kid. There's just too much good stuff on that. What would you think, Pete, of a collaboration that you want to see that hasn't happened yet? Something that in the modern day, we're getting back out into concerts. Who do you want to see play together?
So I was thinking about this, Willie, and as far as modern day artists, I would like to see Kingfish collaborate with Gary Clark Jr.
Okay.
And I think that would be something that would really help bring more people into the genre and really be something that could be kind of fresh, new, and pretty cool. Doing an interview with Kingfish a couple of years back, we were talking about bringing younger people into the genre. And he said, bring them in with the hip hop and then tell them about the real deal. So I think if you had Kingfish collaborate with Gary Clark Jr., who's known to kind of take blues in different directions, and I think Gary Clark Jr. could bring it kind of in that hip hop sort of direction. If you had Kingfish and Gary Clark Jr. kind of collaborate together and kind of bring blues in that sort of direction, but still you still have the blues there, I think that would be very cool. And I think it would help bring more people in. And I think it would help Kingfish as well to kind of get his name out there a little bit more and get out to more people. But I think that's just a collaboration that would really benefit everybody.
I agree with that. That's a great one. Like you said, for the obvious reasons, the breadth of who they would get interested in the music is probably bigger than any tandem that I can think of. In the vein of wanting to get someone's name out there a bit more, she just released an incredible album, and I think she's one of the better guitarists in the world right now. I'd love to see Joanna Connor team up with Doyle Brimel II. I think that their leanings into a very hard, very intense version that is, like I said, a continuation of what that sort of barroom blues would sound like in today's modern world. I think the two of them could do a great job together. And I think for both of them, I would love to see that, because those are two names that I don't think get nearly the respect that they deserve. So I don't know. I guess I'd like to hear what our audience thinks. Go ahead, post a comment. Let us know who you want to see team up, because if you start the idea, you never know who might be listening. Get some of your favorites, get some of these little names out there and make them into the stars they deserve to be. Right, Pete?
Yeah, and that duo that you mentioned, Willie, super underrated. So yeah, let us know down in the comments section below some of your favorite blues collaborations, and we'll put the link down in the description box to the article so you can check that out as well. But yeah, let us know about your thoughts on that, and leave some comments too about Spotify and what's your favorite streaming platform. We'd love to hear from you on that. And of course, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. We're trying to figure out YouTube's algorithm, so apparently that helps, you know. So help us out there, please. But that's going to wrap up this week's edition of the Blues Rock Show. For Willie Witten, I'm Pete Francis. We'll see you next time.